Yeah, I know that everyone's always pissed at the referees, and I
Mm.
guess this year had an unusual number of.
All right, y'all. I'm Kevin Estopanol. Welcome back to the Kevin Estopanol Show. We have a returning guest, and Professor Dave. You're returning for like the third or fourth time, and your episode's actually my most viewed interview. So congratulations. Maybe you're not too crazy, right? Right, Professor Dave?
I know people who watch everything that I put out there, and to me, I feel like an infinite loop just playing over and over. So I don't quite understand that, but yeah.
It does feel that way, like when you do interviews on like certain topics, especially some of the topics that we're gonna discuss, because there are only so many ways you can break down what's going on in the world right now without either repeating yourself or just repeating something that somebody else said. But did you happen to catch the Super Bowl, Professor Dave?
I did. I don't watch a lot of football now because my wife doesn't like it, and so the choice of turning her into a football widow is doesn't seem like the right thing to do for me. So I just let it go. I did notice something at the end of the Super Bowl. There's people who seem to think that football is now kind of rigged, and is there any evidence of that?
Well, as it begins, yeah, there is some evidence to that. As it gets more, commercialized and as it gets more money involved and more sponsors, I definitely say there's maybe some correlation and, perhaps, the NFL, like they need to have stars, they need ratings.
So
So
you can
in order.
imagine a $500 million difference between Team A and Team B in terms of viewership and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Exactly. So, like, I live in New Orleans. So, like, when the Saints won the Super Bowl, that was like the craziest thing ever because it was like a small market New Orleans team. And I
right.
don't think the NFL really wanted them in. But anybody that follows the Saints football, it was like the craziest year that we made it. So, I'm not going to say it's rigged, but I wouldn't be surprised if the NFL is influencing the way they want, like, certain narratives or certain teams. But I'm
Well,
sure people would disagree.
some ex NFL guys supposedly went out on social media and said it's professional wrestling now.
I did see that. I don't know, man. When I say it's rigged, I'm talking more about like the gambling aspect of it, with these point spreads and how much money is involved with now Vegas, with sports betting, being legalized across the country. And now there's
Hmm.
an NFL team in Vegas. So
Right.
maybe it's rigged. What you think? So you think it is?
I don't have an opinion. That's why I asked because I know that everyone's always pissed at the referees, and I
Mm.
guess this year had an unusual number of egregiously bad calls where they go, "How could you have looked at the replay of that and made that call?" I
Oh yeah,
I,
and all it
I only
all.
hear about it. I don't watch it, and so I don't know
Mhm.
whether people are just being whiny bitches or whether they have a good case because I'm always amazed at how good the referees are. I'm always amazed when I think, oh, that's a shitty call, and then they show the slow mo, and I go, oh, they nailed it, right? So
Oh
my
yeah,
experience has always been this spectacularly good refereeing.
it's a bang bang thing, to catch some of those little,
Hmm.
items and not having the ability to be sitting on your couch with HD TV watching a replay. Did you happen to see Biden had a Super Bowl commercial? Did you happen to see that?
I did pick that up. Yeah, that was moronic beyond comprehension. The Biden story is an interesting one because you get the feeling he's being taken off the stage now. There's a hunch that the protecting mechanisms are being pulled away, and at the same time, you get the feeling that maybe his team is furiously trying to keep him in the game. So
Mhm.
there'll be people going on TV and say that, there's no president who's been sharper than Joe Biden, and I go, you got to stop being that stupid. We're just not that dumb, right? And
Yeah, I don't know if you caught it. I caught an interview with Kamala Harris and they were talking about, her as a possible replacement for Biden. And she, jumped at that idea and nowhere in what she said, where normally they'd say, oh, President Biden, he's real cognitive. He's all there. He's the sharpest he's ever been or something like that. She didn't say anything like that. So, like in the
but her
shows, like,
team undoubtedly set up that interview and that question,
oh, 100%, 100%. So I
right?
feel like the deep state maybe, like, when somebody's, like, performing on stage and a big hook comes out and just grabs them
Yeah,
and pulls
right,
them off.
right.
Is that what they're gonna have to do to Biden to get him out?
I don't know. So I think the idea of them wanting to get him out is clear. I think that the timing and the choice of whom to put in and things like that are by no means clear. I don't know how you do it in a way that doesn't look like a rigged NFL game. So I don't know how they intend to do it. It looks like it's going to require some dexterity. I would have said they were going to, fake a stroke, which for Biden would be pretty easy to do. But if his team doesn't want to be taken off the field, then they got a problem, right? I figured he'd agree. They'd say it's time to go, Joe, and he'd say, yeah, okay, where's my Game Boy, and then leave. But I think his team is saying, no, we want 4 more years of graft and corruption. So
yeah, I think that, what they would kind of want now is to just re-roll both the candidates. Like if they get rid of Biden, to get rid of Trump, just to have 2 new installed candidates, somebody like maybe like a Nikki Haley or Gavin Newsom, which would be,
gag me with a spoon.
Yeah. I might move out the country at that point. But what's kind of your prediction? Do you think it's going to be Kamala? Do you think it's going to be Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama?
I posed that. So I said I had a wild week. My week began with a Zoom call with the presidential candidate, which sounds great, but he's a minor player. You wouldn't even know his name. But then it turns out I had dinner with Matt Taibbi, and I kind of posed some of those questions to him, and he really balked. He just didn't want to answer them. I said, okay, let's just start simple. Is Biden going to be on the ticket or not? And he was pretty non-committal. Then I found out at the dinner, there was a guy at the end of the table who kept throwing in legal statements about things that we were chatting about. There's about 8 of us at dinner. And at the end, I'm talking to the guy. So what are you in our law school or something? He said, no, I'm a Supreme Court justice of New York State. And I go, what? What? So I picked his brain for about a half an hour about things like Colorado's decision and stuff like that. And he basically said they totally boned that one.
Oh, 100%.
Well, that's what we think. But to hear from a New York State Supreme Court justice, it's a little bit different, right? But he said I said, so they really should have been trying to bend over backwards not to make that call, right? And he said, absolutely. So
now, what's Trump's fate kind of in all of this? Do you think it just seems like the attacks aren't going to stop? Is there any
but
chance?
They're faltering though. The attacks are all faltering. So I think the New York case is completely flawed, right? I mean, it's flawed from head to toe. I actually think the Georgia case is flawed. I think that this idea that he asked for 11,000 votes to be fabricated wasn't true. He said, go find me 11,000 fraudulent votes. And that's a totally rational thing to ask for. So, and then you got Big Fanny down there who boned it. And so all of a sudden the lead prosecutor's scrambling to keep herself out of jail. And so both of those cases look like they could be DOA. Trump acts like he knows they're not going anywhere. I don't see evidence. Of course, he might not be a panicker, but somehow it's conceivable that he knows that this is all just theater and that he's not going to go to jail and they're not going to go that route. They're just trying to do that pre-election and then it'll all just go away. I remember when Matt Gaetz was accused of some sexual harassment for about a week, and then it went away. I think Trump will run. I think that I'm a big believer that you care of me talking about the election of 2020?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. I mean, it was I don't know about you, Professor Dave. The 2020 election was the most secure election all time, the most secure election, zero fraud. I mean, I'm just, that's all I got.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Just a sign error on that. And so I think for Biden to beat Trump, I think would require the 2020 elections and supreme integrity to reach a new level, right? I think they're actually beginning to realize they can't even fake it, right? That it would be one of these things like, well, only 3 people voted for him, but we have to add another 85 million to the tally, that sort of thing.
We got to count all the mail-in ballots. We got to count them all.
Well, and then are they going to blanket out the mail-in ballots? Do you think they're going to do that?
From what I hear is that there's not enough votes, like meaning that like from the data they have and the poll numbers. And I'm also hearing stuff from the Trump camp that the Trump team, hey, if it's legal to ballot harvest and whatever, I don't know the legal framework, they were able to do that with Mark Zuckerberg and stuff, that the Trump team is going to do the same thing.
Well, except for, don't forget, the law is being applied unevenly.
Of course.
Right? So I've been talking about some dicey subjects off and on, and normally you would say, look, how do I stay on the correct side of the law? But it's pretty clear now that if someone decides to inflict pain and suffering through the legal system, now they can do it. You could be 100% correct, and it just doesn't matter, which to me is brand new to my personal experience. Now, I think you're black in the hood, you go, sorry, but this has been going on for a long time. But the idea that the weaponization of the justice system is so bad that I don't know if Trump can do it just like the Democrats do it and not end up in trouble.
Exactly. That, I think it's almost like a trap if they do anything like that, because if he does happen to win, then they're just not going to accept the results. And it kind of seems, I mean, I don't know if you saw, there's a new movie coming out that like depicting a civil war. You know, you got the Obama movie, Leave the World Behind. It just seems like that's the kind of path that we're heading on, you know, where
Well, I'm
this is
having
getting,
trouble picturing a 2024 election that's uneventful. But obviously, it'll be eventful, but one that doesn't eventually lead to unprecedented disruption. And maybe it's not even unprecedented. I wasn't around for Lincoln getting elected. I wasn't around for, so. But it's going to feel like a modern era unprecedented, because I don't remember people having total cows. You know, it was the Bush versus Gore problem. But I think the Supreme Court might have been biased, but they basically were called upon to end the fiasco, and they did. So.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. You know, I've said it, Professor Dave. I think 2024 is going to be the craziest year of our lives, and I think we're 2 months in, and it probably hasn't disappointed us too much. Now, did you happen to catch the price of Bitcoin today, Professor Dave? You know, I got to ask you about some Bitcoin.
Probably over 50, right? Made it over 50.
Like 51, 52, which remember what Bitcoin was the last time we talked?
Probably about 30.
Yeah, it was like 37, I think. So has anything changed? I know you mentioned you were talking to Lynn Alden for a while, maybe. Anything kind of good, bad about Bitcoin?
Well, again, I don't use price as an indicator. So I don't even use price of my own equities as an indicator of my investing.
Wow.
I use protocol, I use process. And if the process is right, I have faith that over time the outcome will be correct. So some people say, what price would you buy it at? That's not what I'm waiting for. So I give that answer every single time. So and what I tell you is the higher it goes, the less likely I am to jump into it. Right.
I hear that a lot. You know, whether it's I missed the boat, or they're just like you, they're just not into it now.
Well, I said no, thank you at 10. So the boat sailed for me a long time ago. And I have mixed emotions. No one wants to miss a boat, but I do believe Bitcoin is going to do battle with the state, and I believe that we're going to find out what happens to that. What I don't know is whether or not the perfect entry would be for them to do battle and for me to have gotten up to speed on the idea that if they win, then I should get in. It'd be real nice if my epiphany, they've won, matches a real low price. Now that's hard because it's not going to look like they won, right? It's not going to look like so it's going to have to be. But I watch it. I just ordered the Bitcoin Standard to read in earnest, and so
I definitely can't wait to talk to you about that.
Investing is at one level absolutely not obsessing over what you didn't do. Right. You should pass on all sorts of good ideas. My worst investing decision ever was I owned a company that got bought up by a company called LabCorp, and I didn't know the company LabCorp, so I sold. I said, okay, so made some quickie profit and sold because I didn't understand what the company that bought them. I went up 100-fold. I don't lose sleep over it. It was my worst decision ever. Unless you want to say, I almost bought Apple at the bottom for the wrong reason, which is why it doesn't bother me, because my reasoning was wrong. The reason to buy Apple was that you somehow saw their cloud presence coming. What I saw was the Intel chip. And I don't think the Intel chip was that important, but I almost bought it then. And would I have sold it along the way? I don't know. Would I buy the Mag 7 if they come down by a factor of 10, which is what I think they need? Well, I literally think a factor of 10 would be a good number to consider a drop.
The stock market, it's really like blowing my mind right now, because isn't that like all-time highs? And some of my positions are doing really well, like Nvidia and Tesla. And then you just kind of look at it and it's like these couple companies are just carrying the rest of the stock market. Like it's pretty crazy. Like I know you've predicted a lot.
But if you study the history of markets, that's always the case.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, yeah. The
It's been this
tops are.
top heavy though. This top heavy.
I don't know if this might be a record, but the idea of a narrowing market at the top,
Mm-hmm.
so that the leaders become less and less
Mm-hmm.
distributed. So a real healthy bull market, things are chugging on. Also, I think in a healthy bull market, there's economic reasons that are propelling it, and we don't have economic reasons propelling this market. Right, and you can
Yeah.
talk about that. You can talk about how healthy the economy is, but I think you're on drugs if you claim this is a healthy economy. I don't think it's a good economy.
What's the saying? Governments love to lie using statistics, and it
Yeah,
does seem like what's next? Gas prices are going to go super low, like right before the election, or interest rates are going to come down. It just seems really manufactured to me.
but see, all those issues are the kind of issues that if I used them to make a decision
Hmm.
and then was wrong, and I always send every decision I make through a filter, and one of the biggest filters is if I am terribly wrong, will I forgive myself?
Hmm.
And if the answer is no, then I don't try not to do it.
Hmm.
And so if I decided that I was going to jump into Nvidia because I think it's going to go up more, and then I got clobbered, for me it would be unforgivable because I know better. Now you've owned it. If you've made a great profit, I understand the stickiness of Nvidia in your portfolio. It's hard to sell the winner.
I
But for
sold
me to
half of
jump
it.
into,
I sold
okay,
half of it, and it kept going up.
right, and that's
Can't
what
win.
will happen. But Nvidia's share price and its performance as a wealth creating company don't match at all.
Oh yeah, and I mean, who knows what the future holds? It does seem like chipsets and graphics cards for the foreseeable future with AI and crypto and all this. That's kind of the future. But with technology, you never know. Something new could come out that maybe those type of technology. Just like remember the floppy drives, like the disk A
Hmm.
floppy drives, and you had the disk
Hmm.
B which was the big one, and then you went to CDs, DVDs, and it just kind of kept evolving to where we are now. So I don't know.
Well, so for Nvidia to catch up, they have to sell truly unbelievable more chips, right? They really got to sell truly extraordinary more. You've got to presume that there's other companies that are saying, we should try to get that market, right? And so the competitors are not going to wait for Nvidia to just print trillions. And
There's a
and that's what.
few. There's what AMD, and there's the Taiwan Semiconductor. I think there's a couple of them, but I don't know. I mean, from what I hear, Nvidia is just light years ahead of them. But yeah, there's gonna be a competitor to that. There's too much market share, right?
Well, and again, the valuation metrics, Nvidia can grow its earnings 20% a year for a very long time
Mm-hmm.
and not be fair valued.
Oh, it's well overpriced, but in the stock market, I don't even know if that matters anymore.
It
Pro-
it doesn't
the
today,
profits,
but
the earnings,
it
yeah.
will. Here's the question I'll
Mhm.
ask you: is there ever in history been a stock market that was overvalued that didn't ultimately correct? The answer is no.
No, yeah,
Not
never.
in the history, not in the history of markets.
Wow.
And then you ask, okay, has there ever been a stock market that's way overvalued that corrected through just growth?
Hmm.
I can't even name one of those.
Hmm.
And by the way, if GDP soars,
Hmm.
soaring being like 3%, because historically GDP growth is sort of in the ballpark of two, a little over two,
Hmm.
2.2, something like that. If it soars to four, which for an industrialized nation seems very unlikely, it'll still take many, many years for the GDP to grow into being fair value, the market being fair value.
Oh,
Decades.
it's just a casino, and it's just craziness, and I got a little bit of my portfolio in the stock market. I got some in crypto. I like to be diversified. I know you're not the biggest fan of wide diversification, but
Oh, I would be
mhm,
if the markets were collectively undervalued,
good
right?
point.
But right now, not only that, but the other problem is that um, every good investment idea eventually gets arbitraged away. So it starts as a good idea, becomes a business model, becomes a racket, right? That's
Mhm.
stealing a political statement. And the one that is, I think, at some point going to come to a head is indexing.
Oh, with
So
like
indexing was a brilliant idea, and for decades it's carried us.
with the
But
index
but
funds?
yeah,
Mhm.
but now it's the indexing algorithms have caused people to buy companies mindlessly and to let companies get overvalued mindlessly. And at some point, active management will come back.
Yeah, so what are you saying that companies that are in broad market, like index fund baskets, that their price is being manipulated because people are buying the indexes?
Well, the index, the flood of money into index is causing the most overvalued stocks to be purchased disproportionately,
Mhm.
right? So
That
if you
makes
went to
sense.
the grocery store and you had a shopping list of 100 things you had to buy,
Mhm.
but it was market cap weighted, you say, okay, so ribeye is even more expensive today than it was yesterday, so I'll buy more ribeye.
Mhm.
And if it gets higher, I'll buy more ribeye. And that's it should be the other way around, right? That's ass
Mhm.
backwards. And so at some point it will correct, and then people who index their way into oblivion will say, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to
Mhm.
actually shop for companies that are cheap, and someone will come up with a new way to value invest. Value
Mhm.
not meaning dirt cheap, meaning dirt cheap relative to growth.
Mhm.
But growth is fake. I watched the dot-com bubble. Everyone thought that was growth. That wasn't growth.
I wasn't
The Nikkei
investing back
was the
then. I
Nikkei the
probably would have got
Nikkei
wrecked.
the Nikkei wasn't growth. The Nikkei
Mhm.
was a credit bubble, and
Mhm.
so the 1929, that wasn't growth.
Mhm.
That was a massive credit bubble. It was a consumer credit and an equity,
I guess
investment
2020 wasn't
trust.
growth either, huh?
Well, 2020 is just a blip. I mean,
Mhm.
2020 is just a noise. That's
Mhm.
a nothing. It was the market has been overvalued since 1994.
That makes sense. No, that makes a ton of sense.
Now you say, well, therefore, Dave, you're wrong. I go, no, therefore, the pain that's coming is going to be long and protracted.
I know you've said that, and like I reevaluate, like I think of you saying that. I really do. Like my real estate portfolio, my stocks, my Bitcoin. It's like up so many W's, so many wins, and it's like, do I sell and take pride? Then it's like, what do you do with the money? Just get
I don't,
taxed and
I don't know actually. I, I think markets can become uninvestable,
oh, 100, yeah, oh yeah, oh
right?
yeah.
Like the Nikkei was uninvestable,
Mhm.
and
It
so the trick is to find the stuff that really is cheap, and you got to make sure you don't do cheap by comparison. Because if let's say there was a 60% correction, it's not all going to come out of
Mhm.
Mag 7. It's going to come out of everything. And so, when the market's PE was 6 back in 1981, half the stocks were below 6.
Mhm.
If you had bought a stock with a PE of 10, thinking you're somehow safe because it's saying you're going to get a 10% return, well, that stock could have had a PE at 4 by the end of that correction.
Mhm.
And it took 14 years for the 67, 81 bear market to exact its pain. So it's not just about price, which inflation adjusted treaded water, but inflation was running wild.
Mhm.
But it also is about time. 14 years is, crudely speaking, a third of your investment life. So
Yeah.
it's like burning the clock, right? You say, look, not only did we not score any points, but we burned 2/4 of the football game to not score any points, right? I mean, you can't do that.
Yeah, it's scary to think about, just as, people with all their money in, 401ks or IRAs, and then whatever we're going into, if it does get really bad and really crazy, like, is that just the end of the country or the end of the world? Like if these
No,
markets, you
no,
think,
but it'll be painful. Was the Great Depression the end of the country?
no, no,
But you didn't want to be there.
no,
World War II wasn't the end of the country. You didn't want to be there.
definitely didn't want to be there.
Right.
uh,
So the analogy I use is an ant hill, where if you have a big one in your backyard, you go on and you stomp on it all day long.
mhm,
You go back the next day, there's going to be two things. There's still going to be an ant hill,
mhm.
and there's going to be a lot of dead ants. And
Do
the
you,
question is, do you want to be a dead ant?
I do not wanna be a dead ant.
Right.
Do you think that, like, we're in World War III already?
We could be. It might be too hyperbolic, but we are in a period of tremendous flux. I'm not sure World War III is the right way to call it. It depends on what you attribute problems that we're looking at, where
Mhm,
they're coming from. So, for example, if the open borders and and various things like money being pumped into Ukraine and stuff are part of World War III, and that
Oh yeah.
we just don't know it, then yes.
Hmm.
Or if it's a prelude to World War III, then you know, then not yet, but we're getting close. We're getting dangerous. I look at. I've tried to understand why people of great power are doing things that seem so against the fundamental principles of the United States. So I would say, look, you got Democrats, you got Republicans, but down at the foundational level, we believe in the system. I no longer believe that to be true.
Hmm.
I believe I can see politicians doing things that you say, look, at the most foundational levels, they are acting in the disinterest of the United States. So the question becomes why? Who owns them? What are they? Who's calling the shots to get us to? Who told the European leaders to let millions of refugees flood into Europe and turn Europe into a shitstorm?
Hmm.
Who told us to open our borders?
Yeah, why is it, and it's just crazy, Professor Dave, like having so many discussions with you with Ukraine and
Mm-hmm.
international, what's going on around the world, and then to see so much developing since we last talked, and it just seems like you've been right about so many things when it comes to Russia or Ukraine. Has anybody come to you recently and been like, wow, like you were actually right about a lot of the stuff going on over there?
I get some of that. I think my
Mhm.
Ukraine call was one of my best.
Mhm.
My write up on Ukraine at the end of 2022. I think I almost have no revisions that I feel that
Wow.
I need to put into it. I think I nailed it. Um, I think Tucker Carlson's interview of Putin, for me, Putin's responses were an answer key
Mhm.
to what I wrote about at some
Mhm.
level. I do not believe Putin was lying. He certainly was shaping the narrative as best he could. Oh, I'm shocked. What's he going to do? Shoot himself in the foot? No.
Mhm.
Um, People who just said he was lying constantly, go fact check it. Find the part he lied about. And there are, I at one point put out a tweet, said, what are his biggest lies from that interview? And I got the stupidest answers. Someone said, well, he said Hitler didn't want to invade Poland. And I go, well, first of all, I was having trouble remembering that part, but let's accept it. I said, there's all sorts of things I've ended up doing that I didn't want to do. So that statement's impossible to defend or refute. Who
Mhm.
Hitler might not have wanted to, not because he's a good guy, but because no, it wasn't, the timing was wrong. Who knows what?
Mhm.
But he said, but then he did. So Putin's statement was accurate. Someone said he was going to talk about history for a minute or two, and it was 15 minutes. I go, that's his big lie. Holy shit! What are you doing?
I think from what I see from talking to people and watching it, that people wanted Putin to come out and expose the deep state, expose the corruption in the West, expose all the warmongers, and expose everything wrong with the West. And think about it, that's not really his place. His place isn't to
Well, he also
expose.
did. But to those of us who've been paying attention, it didn't seem like new news.
Mhm.
So he did call out the Nazis running around Ukraine,
Mhm.
and there are
Which
people claiming,
you've talked about
oh,
extensively,
extensively.
so you're the first person I thought about when he said that. So it's
And he
like,
also pointed out how many times he approached the West trying to say, look, we don't want trouble, but you got to stay away from A and B and C, that sort of thing. There's things that he's done that I'm not up to speed on, where people say, well, he attacked Crimea or this or that. And I can only be so comprehensive before I got to let it go. But I could imagine that even for ones that look like he did something that was aggressive, you could say, yeah, but I don't know the backstory. So I don't know why he did it.
mhm.
And I could probably find out why, I guess, although the why is always, again, a deep question. It's a hard one to answer. I do believe that NATO had the power to stop that war right from the very beginning and chose not to. So to me, there's 500,000 dead Ukrainians because of NATO.
I didn't know that. Yeah, 500,000 dead Ukrainian. I mean, it's war. It's terrible. It's tragic. We're lucky that we're not dealing with it here. But
Yeah.
what's crazy is that, like, from that interview, Putin, what did he say? That he tried to join NATO and they
Mhm.
wouldn't let him. But it's like, well, NATO's going to keep expanding, to all the countries around Russia, but like you won't let him join. Like, it's incredible. It's like, who's
So
really.
some of that could be shaky. I don't know.
Mhm.
But I do know from what I've read, to the extent that you can know anything, Feynman talks about how hard it is to know anything, that the West promised all sorts of things that we were lying about. So Putin got frustrated. And, when Tucker was trying to get that journalist back, I think he was hoping to pull off a coup, right? That would be a great thing to get that journalist back. First and foremost, there's no way to know if he was actually a spy. I could make the case that yes, he was a spy, but there's so many spies that they know about. We know about the Russian spies running around here. There's pictures of Putin running around places when he was young. We knew about him. And so Putin didn't have to pick him up. But also, I'm sympathetic to a guy who's running a country in which the West is trying to destroy his nation. And
his very way of life.
Why would I give that guy back? Who the hell cares what we want, right? And by the way, we got all bent out of shape out of Khashoggi, and we ignored the fact that Khashoggi was CIA, and he participated in the Mohammed bin Salman attempted assassination. So the fact that Khashoggi got sliced and diced, that's just the cost of doing business. And so to get all bent out of shape out of Putin holding a journalist, and I tweeted, actually, only a couple of people caught up on it. I said, look, to get even with the Tucker Carlson Putin interview, we should have Gonzalo Lira interview Zelensky.
Yeah.
And the people who didn't know that Zelensky had actually captured one of our journalists, we got no help from the State Department getting him back. And one phone call could have done it. There's no chance Zelensky would have said, screw you, to a phone call saying, send Lira back. We didn't want Lira back. We wanted Zelensky to deal with him, and he did. He killed him. We could have gotten him back, but we don't give a shit. We were happy to have, because Gonzalo Lira was causing trouble. So, so screw you. So I wouldn't give that journalist back if I were Putin. We're in a war.
Yeah, and what is it? Some no-goes for Putin. It seems like Putin wants this to end. I truly, and again, with all the propaganda, KGB, all of this, I could be wrong. It seems like he wants this to end. It seems like he is dealing with these intelligence agencies, and that even talking to what he said, he hadn't talked to Biden like ever or something, or hadn't talked to Trump in a while. But it's like, who's really running the country if he can't talk to the president of the free world and get this situation under control? And if
the president of the free world's not calling him to try to end it, right? But that's because we don't want to end it. NATO is the problem, for Christ's sakes. And if you're listening to me, you think I'm nuts, go yourself. I have no patience for you, because you're an ignorant fool if you don't know the subtleties of this story. It means you haven't paid attention, which means put your Ukrainian flag away and start reading. Do something.
Yeah, it seems like there's a real concerted effort, for that narrative's not as big as it was because we're dealing with the stuff in the Middle East. But it seems like there's a big concerted effort to support Ukraine, Slava Ukraine, send money to Ukraine, no matter what. Border security bill. Well, yeah, we can do that, but need more money to Ukraine. So it just seems like
it makes me crazy when I watch that shit.
That
because if we stopped sending money to Ukraine, the war would end today.
Literally. And think about I don't even know how much money we've sent already.
But I don't even know how much of it made it there either, right?
Exactly. And it's like, okay, well, if we didn't send that money and we took whatever the number is and we put it into the infrastructure here, imagine all the problems we could have solved in this country. And it's getting crazy, Professor Dave. I don't know if you know who Stephen A. Smith is. He's got his own show, and he was even, you're seeing him turn on Biden, about the immigration issue, about them giving the immigrations like prepaid cards or some stuff like that. It's like, why do we care so much about, the Ukraine border or the Israel border, and we don't even care about our own border? It just makes no sense.
It would make sense if you understood what the play was. So I keep coming back to the idea that someone wants to destroy the United States. I don't know who. I believe that that our leaders are compromised. And how do you compromise someone? Really interesting. First, you compromise them in a minor way. And once you have them compromised, then you compromise them in a slightly more major way. And so you ramp up the compromising, and pretty soon the guy just can't get out. And then you say, okay, here's what you have to do. And then you're more compromised, right? So you dig a hole and it just gets deeper and deeper, and then you're stuck. Biden is compromised to an unimaginable number of foreign operators.
Mhm.
We know Ukraine. We know China. Say, no, you don't know China. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll bet $1 million he is. I would
Mhm.
comfortably make that bet. I mean, everything points to that. His son was running around China making deals. His son
Would
was running around Ukraine making deals.
What if, and I'm not disagreeing. I think a lot of our politicians are definitely compromised,
I
but
think they
I
all
think
are.
it could be, yeah, it could be even a little more sinister than that. I mean, what if like these politicians, like, they just have a different view of what they want America to be or not be. And their goal, what they call it, the have-nots versus the have-yachts. It's just, elitism. It's just classism, a class system, and that they're just dividing us even more. They
See,
have no.
I think that's not enough.
Mhm.
Actually, I don't think that's enough because I think I don't think they would. I think they would have if they were someone like Jamie Dimon. Looks like a guy who has a ton, but you get the feeling maybe he's still grounded in the
Mhm.
U.S. Now the banks are not U.S. banks, right? That's real straightforward.
Mhm.
J.P. Morgan is no more a U.S. bank than China Buffet is Chinese, right? Um, but at the same time, Jamie looks like a guy who probably has somewhere down deep in his soul a belief in our system.
Mhm.
Now, I can't say that about Biden. I can't say that about a lot of people. Um,
Mhm.
but I don't think you can. It's just greed that would get people to turn on our own system that much.
It's gotta be. It's gotta be, just people just about what they say, America's for sale, and that these politicians have just sold influence, sold whatever they could to enrich themselves and sell out the nation because I guess everybody else is doing it.
I guess so, but shoot them then.
No, do not do that. We do not call for violence on this channel. Professor Dave, you put up a poll, and I saw the answer to the poll, and it was the biggest grift. And it was climate change, COVID, or Ukraine, or none of the above. Do you remember what the overwhelming answer to the poll
No,
was? The,
no,
the overwhelming answer to the poll you put up, I forgot how many votes, but it was a lot of votes, was climate change.
right.
And that kind of surprised me because climate change, I think, is so much more broad of an issue than COVID or Ukraine, which I think
Hmm.
those other two, I don't know about you. Well, I know you can see the scam a lot bigger in COVID or in Ukraine, but climate change. So, like, has that narrative maybe fallen apart before it ever really got started?
Well, it got started.
Oh, it started.
It got started. The reason climate change is the biggest problem is because it can go on for decades if
Mhm.
it doesn't fall apart, and it's the biggest in terms of dollar value and stuff like that.
It's
Um,
unsolvable too, huh?
well, I don't think there's anything to solve.
Mhm.
I think the whole story is a lie. I think it's a lie from head to toe.
Mhm.
There's absolutely no part of that story that I believe at this point. And so, and it didn't take that long to figure that out. I sat down with Konstantin Kyson last fall, and it's clear he thinks it's total bullshit. I said,
Mhm.
"How long did it take you to figure out that it was bullshit?" He said, "Oh, a couple hours." And so if you dig into it and you actually dig into it with an open mind, you quickly discover that the big lies are right in your face, right up front, big lies.
Once you
And
see it, you kind of can't unsee it. Like
that's right.
one thing they kind of said was that, cow farts, are bad for the
Oh,
environment.
I don't worry about those. That's just bullshit journalism, though.
Yeah.
The
Well,
big
the
story.
other.
Here's the big story. Here's the big lie.
Mhm.
Hits you right away. Right
Mhm.
away. Right away. They say that there's a 97% consensus that it's real and that therefore the science is done. We have to solve the problem. It takes you about an hour to figure out that there's famous elite scientists all over the world who think that's total horseshit.
Mhm.
So as soon as you say, okay, apparently there's not consensus, you go, oh, that's a big lie then. That is a major mother of a lie. And then you start digging into it and you find that, for example, you'd be hard pressed to find a solar physicist who buys the climate change story at all.
Mhm.
Very hard pressed to find one. If you do, it's probably some guy who has a solar physics degree from some place you would not want to have a solar physics degree from. Um, but I think, I did a Tom Nelson podcast. He's been following this story since '07, which means he got to it way faster than I did. Um, and I said, do you know a prominent solar physicist who actually signs off on the climate change narrative? He says, no, not a one.
Not
So
one. Wow.
if you're a solar physicist out there and you hear this, send me a goddamn email. Say, hey, you who, I'm one, and I'll dig into your resume and find out if you're worth a damn.
Yeah, I'd love to have somebody come on this show that could maybe break down how it's real or teach me something that, I don't know, but
But the data doesn't even support it. That's the
exactly.
funny
It's
thing.
all hypocrite. It's all so
You lay out
hypocritical.
the data, they've dug into, and the IPCC report, by the way, which is the Bible of climate change.
Mhm.
If you dig into the scientific contribution of the IPCC report, which is, it's actually kind of bifurcated. You got science and you've got politics.
Mhm.
The news reports are all the politics. The IPCC report scientific part, you dig into that and you find that the scientists don't believe the bullshit. And so you find that, low confidence on a bunch of the assertions that we're told are fact.
Mhm.
And so, for example, there's not a shred of evidence that severe climate events have picked up over the last 100 years. Not a shred. Not a
Mhm.
shred. There's huge evidence that the consequences of severe weather events have been mitigated to the extent something like 97%. The number of people who die because of them, way down, way down. So we have coped with the existing ones
Mhm.
really well. We know how to see weather coming. We know how to avoid it. We know how to prepare for it. People don't get caught by surprise. Something like if you look in Europe, for example, the number of people who die from extreme heat is 1/10 the number who die from extreme cold.
Mhm.
If you look at the glaciers, one of the great visuals is the glacier 2022 versus the glacier 1922, that sort of thing, where you go, oh, look at that. The glacier's clearly receding. You're clearly full of shit. Well, it turns out if you actually look at what was underneath those glaciers, there are 1,200-year-old trees
Wow.
and Native American sort of artifacts and stuff like that. What it means is that those trees grew there 1,200 years ago, which means it was warmer.
I didn't think about that. Wow.
Then you see the polar bear that's starving. You go, maybe that polar bear is 45 years old.
Mhm.
Maybe that polar bear has stomach cancer. And
Mhm.
then you find out that what is considered one of the world's experts on Arctic mammals says the polar bear population has tripled since the 70s. So that polar bear picture starts looking stupid.
Mhm. Well,
And
that's why they changed the name from global warming to climate change. So I think
right, but the severe weather events not picking up in severity or in frequency
Mhm.
says that
Um,
that's bullshit.
it's really, because I have friends on both sides of this issue, so it's hard for me to kinda, like, actually say what I really feel
So
about
I
it
would
because
categorize them as the smart ones and the dumb ones. But go ahead.
Yeah, so, but, one thing, obviously, we are doing a lot of harm to this planet.
Okay. Now,
Mhm.
before you go anywhere with that, you're
Mhm.
smuggling in a totally different argument.
Okay.
I totally agree with you.
Mhm.
We're doing all sorts of harm to the planet.
And again, this isn't a pro climate change argument. It's more of what I'm trying to demonstrate for people listening is that, like, all right, so my carbon emissions and output and in your carbon emission output, if we add them together, it's not even a blip on the
Right.
global on the radar, but it just seems like all the solutions involve me getting rid of my car, getting rid of my gas stove, um,
Yeah.
literally getting
Yeah.
rid of my
Those are asinine solutions.
exactly. So it's like in order to perhaps change the degree of the earth by like not even 1%, I have to go into and you have to go into poverty for this to work. But China can just keep emitting all the carbon, can have all the coal plants, the military industrial complex. Didn't they say the Nord Stream, the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline actually emitted the most carbon like ever recorded, I think. So it's
I've
like
heard claims. I don't know how to measure that, but
I don't know how to measure it either.
go if your listeners haven't done this, you should go to YouTube and search Konstantin Kaysen,
Mhm.
Konstantin Kaysen, Oxford Union, and listen to his 10-minute speech on climate change. He lays the whole story out that you just laid out in a brilliant sort of British prose. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just a brilliant speech. I actually transcribed it and wrote it up. Um, and so what my wife, I've finally got her out of the habit of doing is she smuggles in. There's two things that you can smuggle in that tried to defend climate change response. One is to smuggle in resource depletion. I'm a huge resource depletion guy. The world is a sphere and it's finite. And I don't know, a friend of mine, Doomberg, is not worried about energy depletion. Another friend, Chris Martenson, is, Jim Kunstler is.
When you say energy, you think like running out of oil?
Run out of easy oil.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're never going to run out because it's an asymptotic limit. You're always going to have it. It's like running out of a juice out of an orange. You can keep putting pressure on it and you'll get some more juice. But and the debate of abiotic oils resurface and stuff like that. So I don't know, but I do know that if we're drilling through the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico 2 miles down, it's not the same as Jed Clampett shooting buckshot into the side of the mountain and getting oil gurgling to the surface. And we are squeezing that citrus fruit more and more, and so it seems logical to me that it will become an increasingly challenging thing. And can tech keep up? Maybe. I think that's Doomberg's logic. And tech has kept up so far, but the shale boom seemed to have run a pretty fast evolution. So it gave us about a decade of reprieve from the US's. But I'm so reluctant to ignore Doomberg because he is that smart, and I know who he is, and he has every reason to believe he knows more than most of us about things like that. And so resource depletion, a huge issue to me. Where are we going to get the cobalt? Where are we going to get the lithium? Where are we going to get all these metals? I don't know. And then the pollution. Why, when you go to the store, is everything made of plastic, packaged in plastic? If you really wanted to deal with it, you wouldn't get rid of the plastic bags at checkout. You would get rid of the plastic packaging of everything on the planet. You'd sell milk back in cartons instead of in plastic jugs. Right?
Or how many items, or just like stuff made in China that's just completely a waste of resources, just trinkets and stuff like that. That they could just get rid of all that. Professor Dave, I think you're right about the cobalt and the lithium. I think those are much. I mean, look, y'all, I'm not a scientist, but I don't think that we'll ever run out of oil. And I think that the oil regenerates under the earth. And
that's the active debate right now. That went away, and now it has been resurrected. And I don't know which is right.
What's the other side? That it came from dinosaurs or something? Is that why they call it?
No, not dinosaurs. That sort of underplays it. From sediment, from organic sediment.
Oh, well,
dinosaurs trivializes. That's like saying ivermectin is horse food.
I actually took some, not medical advice, y'all. I actually took some. I know.
I did too. It works.
Oh, yeah. I know a fella in the country. He takes it once a month, and
I decided not to do that. I decided not to go because I don't know when to stop. I just have a good stash. My son got sicker than shit. He calls me one morning. He's supposed to go to Costa Rica that day with his mom.
Oh, that sucks.
And he calls me at 5 o'clock in the morning and says, "Dad, I'm sick." And I could hear he's sicker than shit. And he said, "I tested positive." I said, "Well, take 40 milligrams of your ivermectin and a couple of Tylenol, go to bed, wake up, call me back. We'll strategize from there." And he calls me about 4 hours later. He said, "Dad, it's gone." And that is what ivermectin does. So that's an anecdote, but that is what they did. The guys who gave ivermectin to patients, the people sprung right out of bed and said, "I want to go home now." And it's that good.
Yeah, if I got sick, any type of respiratory infection or something like that, bacterial, I would take ivermectin 100%.
You know what you should also do? I'm in a doctor Zoom group. If you get a respiratory infection, rinse your nose with saline. Turns out a lot of the problem sort of grows in your nose and works its way down to your lungs. They say a nasal lavage will cut the severity of a respiratory problem pretty significantly. I had a number of doctors tell me that.
Isn't that where most viruses come through your actual nose, not your mouth?
Yeah. I don't know that.
But they say your eyes or something.
They said rinse out your nose, clean it out, and that'll keep the viral load down long enough for your body to catch up and deal with it.
Yeah.
So my son ended up going to Costa Rica that day.
So
Now,
one day, and it was feeling better.
it was less than one day. It was 4 hours.
They call it a miracle drug. They call it a miracle.
He was not fully recovered, but when he had to get home and he had to get a COVID test to fly home.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, here's what you got to do for 3 days before you go. You got to rinse out your nose,
mm-hmm.
because then you'll test negative for COVID, even if you haven't.
Really?
Well, yeah,
them COVID tests are just
by rinsing out your nose. The reason you do it for several days is so you get most of it out. Then you get it. It's like rinsing clothes or dishes or something. A couple of rinses needed. And then by the time you get tested, you got nothing in your nose. You got no viruses or anything in your nose. So then but I heard that hotels and faraway places were giving people negative COVID tests in their checkout.
Just to get people to go.
Yeah, just here you go. Here's your negative. Get on the plane, have fun, come back next year.
It's crazy. It's so frustrating because like COVID was obviously a subject that divided so many people. And like you were always one of the more refreshing people to listen to on this issue, because like many issues you were dead on right about. And it just seems like you'll never get, like those people will never admit they were wrong. Those people will never like say, hey, look, we can never do that again. We need to learn. Like this is a learning moment. We were fooled. We were tricked. It just seems like there's no justice. There's no retribution. There's nothing. It's almost like COVID didn't happen.
Well, there's a gradient of guilt too. So I got triply vaccinated because of stat or quit.
Mm-hmm.
And people said, oh, you could beat it. You could win. They'd never beat you in court. And I go, I don't want to spend the next 10 years of my life in court. And I got the first two and had no effect whatsoever. And then people said, oh, you shouldn't take the booster. And I go, so you're telling me that I should quit my job instead of taking a shot that the first two did nothing, and that I already have two, by the way. Now, there actually is an argument why the third would do the damage. I mean, actually the stats are showing that there's a very nonlinear response to numbers of shots. So the people who've had 5 or 6 boosters, they could die soon. They could really keel over fast. But that's a compromise I made. I said, look, I have a theory. I'm not willing to give up, the breadwinner status on a theory. And I don't regret it. If I have a heart attack, I'll say, well, it got me.
You'd just be dead. Yeah, you just,
right? Or survive it. But I do believe the interesting question will be if like 2 or 3 years from now, are they still picking up the heart attacks and the myocarditis and stuff like that? Because if that's true, then again, my Dr. Zoom group 2 years ago, we're talking about the vaccine getting into your DNA and vaccine getting into your cells, and you become a walking spike protein factory for eternity. And we were talking about it getting into your germ cells and producing offspring who produce spike protein and things like that. And so
they're putting it in the food. They're putting it in the food and stuff, where
it could very well be. So I'm not getting another vaccine because I don't trust them. I'm done with any. I was not a big vaccine guy anyways, but I'm not taking any more because I don't trust them.
Here's the problem, Professor David. I don't know if you're hearing any of the rumbling coming out about a surprise disease X, they're calling it.
Oh, I'm hearing it, yeah.
So it's almost like all this can go underground, and then I don't know, maybe the election comes and Trump wins, and all of a sudden disease X makes an appearance, and maybe there's a new vaccine, and this one's actually safe and effective, and you have to get it
or necessary, right? Yeah.
Or if you don't get it,
well, since I don't want to disrupt your podcast again, so I won't say it again. But I have a frontier justice gene in me, and I see things happening, and I go, why isn't someone getting even? I don't understand it. And if I had a son who was in prison for 10 years and I knew he didn't do anything, but he's in there because the Democrats put him in there due to January 6th or something, I'd be pondering my next move.
But Professor Dave, it's like this. It's like, it's kind of like, with the World War III argument. It's like, okay, well, who is the enemy? Who's the bad guy?
I'd start with the prosecutor.
Okay. You talk with COVID, who would be the bad guy? Who?
Well, the COVID's a different story because so there's a gradient of guilt in this. So the gradient of guilt goes all the way from the shallowest level where someone compromised for their own personal reasons. So I got triply triply jabbed. And there's people who say that was immoral because you knew the moral thing to do was to fight it. I'm not doing a suicide mission. I made the call on that, and I decided that for me personally, it was better to jab than to give up my job. But then there's doctors who played along, and I'm not asking them to give up their job either, and they had to play along.
Mm-hmm.
They had to play along. Then there's the ones who still haven't figured it out, and they're getting a little guiltier now for being just boobs. Right, for just being ignoramuses, and you can say, oh, Dave, no, I don't agree with that. Oh, yeah, well, okay, I think you're an idiot. You don't agree. There's nothing I can do about that. But then you get the heads of societies who said, like heads of obstetric societies who said 4 months into the jab that it's safe and effective for pregnant women. I go, we're 5 months from the first COVID baby, and you said that. So that person must know they were lying.
Yeah.
They have to know they were lying. So that person's now starting to become seriously guilty. And then you get the Fauci where I go, he's a mass murderer, period.
Is there any updates? I know Rand Paul's come out a lot with hearings and stuff, but like, is there any chance we get any justice? Fauci, maybe this, is there any chance Fauci basically goes to jail?
No.
Any type of prosecution?
No.
Too powerful?
No. There's too many people who are attached to him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, it would be the equivalent of trying to bring down the mob, except for the mob are the guys who make the laws, and there's too many compromised people.
What's it called? Like a RICO charge? Like, could you imagine if there was like a
RICO
but
the RICO charge is going to include Pfizer and Merck and companies like this. You really going to bring down those guys with a RICO charge?
Well, Professor Dave, they all building doomsday bunkers right now. So,
well, no, that's a different story. That's the fear that people will get mad and go batshit. The frontier justice gene will become unlocked.
I've heard that like this is the issue that causes the breakdown and distrust in like, it's like kind of like a society. We have a contract. We have a societal contract as a citizen, as a government. And obviously this contract's been broken many times and long ago, but this is the first time where it feels like the social contract between the people and the governments around the world has 100% been broken. Well,
except for, again, us being on social media, we might be getting a distorted view of society's overall opinion. So for example, I was talking to an immunologist about a week ago, and the topic of COVID came up, and the discussion unraveled in a way that's so common now that it's why you used to be you pick your friends based on various parameters. Now it's you pick your friends based on whether they agree with you on these key issues. And if they don't, you can't even hold conversations because it goes batshit. And so I'm talking to her, and she didn't disagree with me about COVID. There's a lot of hot bone issues, lab leak, you name it, ivermectin, you name it. She didn't know they were issues. She's an immunologist. Wow. She did not know they were issues. And I go, so you're not aware that ivermectin actually works? She said, what do you mean it works? And I said, yeah, it works like a champ. And she said, well, if it worked, why wouldn't my doctor prescribe it? And I said, oh, please.
My dad,
I don't even know where to start with that.
My dad asked the doctor about it, and his doctor told him he didn't know what it was.
That's exactly my point. So here are people who it was Super Bowl Sunday for them in theory, right? This is the big game now that COVID shows up. I had been reading about immunology before COVID showed up, just by coincidence. It started back in 2005, but I'd been reading that summer about immunology and watching TED Talks and stuff. I was just curious. So when it showed up, I go, oh, this is interesting. These are people who should have found the story interesting and didn't care. So I think the problem is that people really are just putting their left foot in front of their right more than anything else in the world, and they're not. You and I spend probably unimaginable hours per day trying to understand this world through this screwed up lens, right? Most people don't do that. Well, very few people do that.
It's like the deeper you go, like the more questions you get, and the more that what you thought you knew begins to unravel. And COVID was kind of like you said, you pick your friends based on these certain issues, and it sucks that it's like that. But think about it, Professor Dave. Like I don't know if you caught up the Aaron Rodgers and Jimmy Kimmel
debacle.
Well,
I did.
one of the clips of Jimmy Kimmel was that, hey, look, like somebody like me, Kevin, like you're unvaxxed. If something happens to you and you go to the hospital, you swallow.
Oh, I was talking about the other clip where Aaron accuses Kimmel of being a pedophile.
Well, let me stand up for my boy Aaron Rodgers. He didn't accuse that. What he said was, because when Aaron had brought up the list that Jimmy Kimmel, called
Was
him
on.
up. Yeah, he said
Do you know
he
if that
needs.
list is valid? Do you know if that list is valid?
Well, here's how I look at it. The flight log, I believe, is valid. I don't think the actual list. They keep delaying it, or they trickle out some names like Stephen Hawkins or something. But the flight log, to me, this is what I think happened with with Hawkins, is that it's almost like, people want names, they want a list, they want arrest, they want justice, rightfully so. So what they do is they give you something that doesn't matter because he's dead, Stephen Hawkins, and then it's just like, then what? Now we're just back.
So that's exactly right. Actually, if you read about trafficking and you read about prominent people who are involved in trafficking, actually the only ones you hear the names of in detail, usually they're almost big percentage of the time are the dead ones.
Wow.
No one wants to name the live ones because you get whacked if you do that. I was on a podcast yesterday, 2.5 hour podcast, which I laid out the case of what I've been studying on human trafficking. And partway through the podcast, the CIA trafficking expert showed up. Someone dropped a dime and said, you ought to join us on the Zoom call. Really? And at the end, we exchanged notes. Based on his 15-minute overview that he gave without having heard mine, I went for like 2 hours and he gave a 15-minute overview, 100% overlap.
Really?
I nailed it. I nailed it, according to the CIA trafficking expert. He said something extraordinary, actually. He said 20% of the CIA is involved in human trafficking, which I knew they were doing bad stuff, but 20%, holy shit.
And again, when we talk about these social contracts being broken, another poll that you had put on Twitter, Professor Dave, it was, generally speaking, is the FBI working for the people? And do you remember the results of that poll?
Oh, it's like 95% no. It was a biggie.
It was overwhelmingly no. So I'm assuming, like that, if you think about it, that kind of makes sense. If the CIA, if they are involved in that, the FBI or whoever is involved in that, it's like, what has happened? Like, how do these institutions, like, how could they all fail us? How can there be no checks and balances? How can there be no, agency that could stop this?
Well, the CIA, by example, has its roots in organized crime. So before the CIA existed, they were using organized crime to do things like soften up Sicily for invasion during World War II and things like that. When they assembled the CIA, they took criminals to build the thing. So it started out a corrupt organization. Book called Operation Gladio is pretty revealing. It talks about the global drug trade. We all knew that the CIA had their fingers in the drug trade. What I didn't know was that if this book is correct, is that the CIA, the Vatican, and organized crime are the drug trade. And that it's not that the CIA occasionally dabbles in it. They are one of a three-legged stool that represent the global drug trade, possibly with the exception of the fentanyl trade coming out of China.
Let's get into that fentanyl issue, because that seems to be, when they talk about epidemics and pandemics, that seems to be like a bigger epidemic that no one's talking about for whatever reason.
And the Chinese have said, screw you. I mean, the Chinese have said, we don't care. I mean, supposedly.
Walk me through, like, let's say, hypothetically, if fentanyl was being produced in the United States and was flooding, so fentanyl made in the United States was flooding the Russian borders, the Chinese borders, overdoses, people getting addicted. All these stories were happening. What do you think?
Well, we did that to China, right?
We did.
The opium trade.
It was opium.
Yeah.
What was the result?
So for all we know, the Chinese are still pissed at us, and they're not doing it as payback. I don't know.
I live in New Orleans, Professor Dave, and like after Katrina, we got a lot of what was called Chinese drywall. And
oh yeah, that was good stuff, wasn't it?
If you had that in your house, you literally had to gut your house and treat all the wood because it was just like, I think it was like sulfur. It
Toxic.
was like, and it just
Toxic.
like, smelled, and it just ruined all the copper in any metal you had in the house. It ruined your air conditioning system. Like, it was unbelievable. So,
But that could be just negligence. That could be just, bad knockoffs. I
possible.
remember you used to hear about Chinese knockoffs. Now you realize a Chinese knockoff is a knockoff of another Chinese product, right?
Pretty
There
much.
are no Chinese knockoffs of U.S. products, right?
Mhm.
And so, so it's just varying degrees. By the way, where you can see, my son lived in Uruguay,
Mhm.
and the quality of the products coming into Uruguay were way worse than what we get. So we get seconds, they get thirds.
Oh, so but they're coming from China though. It's
Yeah,
still
but it's the stuff that you can't even sell in the United States at all. So it goes to Uruguay. And so you open up something, put it together, and it just falls apart, just falls apart.
when you talk about like the CIA and these intelligence agencies, and it's like, I'm sure you've seen this Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, like the new power couple, and like what the prediction is that they're gonna come out real soon with like a full endorsement of Biden. Like, is this kind of like the new strategy, to get
See, I don't
certain?
think that'll do any good, because I think someone who votes for Biden because those two endorse him is already so stupid they probably are going to vote for Biden.
Say what you say.
I mean, Biden's playing into the moron team. I mean, I'm sure there's smart people who have a reason to vote for Biden. I totally forgive you if you hate Trump that much and you say I'm voting for Biden because I hate Trump. I mean, I don't hate Trump like that, but I do understand that you could hate Trump like that. I think you haven't
Mhm,
looked at it correctly. I
mhm,
disagree with your analysis, but you're not a moron. You
mhm.
just have been swallowed by your hatred of Trump.
That's
And Trump
why.
could be dangerous. He could be if he gets another 4 years, he could take the gloves off and really do some damage. So
Well,
he
that's what
certainly
they're
knows where the
saying. That's
spoons
that's
are.
what the left's saying, is he is
Right,
going
but they're
to.
they're, they're known to lie.
Oh, they're projecting. So like what they're saying is that he's going to use the military to go after them, when it's like, nah, that's what
You mean
y'all
like
are.
January 6th, sort of
Ex-
weaponizing something to go after the people? That would never happen now. Um,
That's what.
I have a mixed
Mhm,
emotion. I want Trump to get elected. I'm full MAGA now because on a single issue at this point. Now, Trump doesn't want to bomb countries and stuff. So I think Trump gets in there, Ukraine goes away right away. I think there's things that happen that are good. When I ask people what's the worst thing Trump did, it's usually about him being a douchebag.
mhm.
Um, I don't care about him being a douchebag. I care about the big ticket items. Um, I want him to day one do a blanket pardoning of everyone from January 6th. I want him to just go through, swipe them out day one. He can whatever he wants to do on day two, have a ball. Now,
Pardon maybe Julian Assange. Pardon Edward
that would be
Snowden.
wonderful.
Maybe.
That would be
Mhm,
wonderful. I bet you Trump could negotiate to get some of those guys out of the Soviet Union in a heartbeat.
mhm.
And I'm not sure Trump will be as vulnerable to accusation of Russia collusion that he was the first 4 years.
They're gonna try it. I bet you they'll try.
But they've been shown to be pathological liars, so it's going to be harder to sell since they've been shown to be pathological
Mhm.
liars.
Yeah,
Um,
the more, the more they lie, or the more like crazy they get, the more they kind of expose themselves, it feels like.
but the right is not doing anything either.
No,
It,
no.
it appears to me as though the left has the football and the rights forgot to field a defense.
Or they're playing prevent defense and just letting them
I don't
finish
think
ahead.
I'm not seeing the defense. I'm not
Yeah.
seeing it at all. Right? I mean, I had epiphany the other day, and I was so embarrassed that it took me this long to have it. It took me years to have it. So we know that Pence at the end did something that the Team MAGA didn't like. Right? At the
Mhm.
end, he didn't defend Trump, but that didn't shock me. Right? That was one of these. Look, it is what it is. You can say Ford shouldn't have pardoned Nixon. You can get bent out of shape over that one if you
Mhm.
want. So that was not my Pence is a douchebag moment, although he paid a very high price for that because he lost. He had. I thought he'd be a front runner.
Mhm.
The reason I thought he'd be a front runner is because he went through 4 years of Trump without getting a single scratch.
Mhm.
Can you think of anything that they hurt him with? Anything? That's
No.
extraordinary. And then it finally clicked. No, that's too extraordinary. No one within arm's reach of Trump
Mhm.
came out with anything less than scarring all over their face and bruises on their butts. And, you could not be in Trump's inner circle without getting pounded,
Mhm.
except for
Oh,
Pence.
yeah.
So what
So
was Pence? Pence was a spy the whole way. they're not going to beat on Pence because he was their man.
That exactly. Now that's kind of
Well,
like
it didn't click how serious that was until recently. And I'm going, Dave, how could you have overlooked that?
definitely. And what it seems like, like with Pence is, that he did stab Trump in the back. I know people are going to see it different ways, but
well, I don't even call stabbing him in the back. At the end, when he made the decision that basically ended the debate over the presidency, it could have been in a cold, calculated look. This is the way we got to go.
Because it could cause, civil war or, just almost like kick the can. I don't know. I don't know if Pence is bad, evil, whatever. It did seem kind of weird, but it goes back to my biggest issue with Trump would be the selection of his cabinet. And
no, that's not even fair.
Why not?
Well, for starters, his first cabinet, he could trust nobody. He quickly learned the people he thought he could trust, he couldn't trust. So his inner circle became his family, which is a disaster. And he was trying to put together a cabinet with no help from the Republicans. So never before has a person had so much trouble trying to organize his first year in the White House. Now, horrific appointment, somebody like Josh Bolton. But I think that was him trying to negotiate with the neocons to say, leave me alone. I'll put Bolton in my inner circle. And he thought he could negotiate. That's like negotiating with a goddamn pack of hyenas. And so when he put Bolton in there, that to me was appalling. So here's what I think he's going to do, though. He now knows who he can trust.
That's what my dad says. That's what my dad.
He's going to build a war cabinet. It's not going to be a war cabinet to do war against Putin. It's going to be a war cabinet to do civil war.
That's the scary thing, I feel.
No, but I don't mean in a war sense. He's going to have a cabinet where when they come at him, this cabinet's going to be able to fight back.
And look, at this point, I'll say this. I've been real critical of Trump, but he may literally be our only shot because he is, it seems like he is going to be the candidate. Now, a big question for me, Professor Dave, is who do you think Trump is going to choose as his VP? Because isn't it time for him to pick yet? Is it getting close?
Well, we haven't had the convention, and oftentimes that's when it gets announced. So I would say he doesn't have to pick yet, based on even traditional metrics. I'm hoping he will pick somebody interesting. What I don't want to see is some, how they say, well, Kennedy picked LBJ to get the vote of the Democrats in the South. I don't want a candidate. I don't want a VP like that. I want him to pick someone interesting.
So you don't want a strategic choice, like maybe he picks someone from one of the swing states, like a governor from one of the swing states or something.
I want him to pick someone to share the foxhole with.
Give us a name, Professor Dave. Who do you predict Trump will pick for VP?
Well, I can't predict that. There's names that come to mind as cabinet members. I don't know how I'd use them. He could slip one in as VP, but candidate members include, let's start with Tucker Carlson. He could be press secretary, something like that.
I know Trump Jr. wanted Alex Jones as press secretary.
That would be stupid. That would be stupid. That would be beyond stupid. Alex Jones cannot possibly keep his shit together long enough to do anything constructive. And I'm an Alex Jones fan.
Oh, yeah, it would be must-see TV.
I watched part of the Zero Hedge debate, and then I noticed his chair was empty in a couple of clips. But something bad must have happened.
I had to turn that debate off.
He ruined that
It's
debate.
Too many people. You can't have a debate.
Well, it's not just too many, but he did his Alex Jones screamy thing, and those left-wing douchebags, and I really didn't like them, but they knew how to play him perfectly. They knew how to play Alex.
I didn't even watch it all. I had to turn it. It was just too much screaming and stuff. Yeah, it was just too much.
And those smug bastards on the left Alex just played into their.
You can catch that,
I know.
Dave.
No. That's a whack job who calls me.
Hopefully he's not watching this episode.
Yeah, probably not. So I hope he doesn't pick someone to get states. I don't want that. I want an interesting candidate. So I'd love to see in this cabinet. I'd like to see Michael Flynn in there. I'd like to see Douglas McGregor in there. I'd like to see, what's that?
Vivek Ramaswamy?
Well, I do like the way he thinks, but he's kind of polished to the point of like a boy band. And I'm a little worried.
He's a plant?
A little worried that well, I don't know. He's almost, it's like you're in a bar
Mm-hmm.
and some chick sits down next to you and she's so goddamn hot and she's coming on to you, go, something's wrong. I'm not sure what it is.
Too
And
easy.
it's self-defeating because you go, that's the dream pickup right there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just too real. It's there's something wrong here. I'm 68, she's not. What's going on here? There's a problem with this story. So Vivek says all the right things,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't feel completely organic to me.
It doesn't. It
And
doesn't. I
so
mean,
I would love to see him pick Tulsi.
that was my dark horse pick. So Vivek's who I think
I'm
he's
not
gonna
sure
pick.
it's a dark horse because he gets the chick vote and he draws some Democrats.
Well, she's Alaska, right? Alaska.
Yeah, but she's a chick and she's a Democrat by training.
Yeah. Yeah, she was a
Right?
Democrat for a long time.
She would be in the other party from when she actually ran for president.
Yeah.
Right? That's a pretty surreal moment.
She's somebody, I've heard a lot of bad stuff about her, but then when you listen to her, I'm like, dude,
bullshit.
she is
the
genius.
bad stuff is bullshit. The New World Order stuff, the World Economic Forum stuff, they try to bring any potential leader in and you become sort of part of the New World Order. Doesn't mean that you sign off on what they did. They did it to Putin. I see no evidence of Putin being in that group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
so
he's
when
not
you're
even
when you're a
inviting to
young
the WEF.
when you're a young punk and they invite you to go to Davos, you go to Davos.
I would have went, I
my God, yes. You don't have to become a Davosian. You just go to Davos. Now she could be. I don't know. I mean, I don't trust anyone at this point. But
I don't trust anyone. But I look at it like if it's that diabolical, where Putin's with them, and it's
then we're done.
Then it's just like, okay, just drone strike me and get it over with.
Yeah, I know. Drop a nuke, hit the grid.
Professor Dave,
who did I miss? Who do you have?
I think it's gonna be Vivek. And I think that just because he had brought Vivek up after one of the primaries, after one of the Vivek was speaking with him. They spoke so highly of each other, and I'm like, all right, it's not the same.
Well, Vivek endorsed him.
Yeah,
and he's very articulate. So having Vivek out there in
unbelievably
lucid English supporting your case, I'm not sure Vivek and Trump aren't a little bit of an oil and water problem.
Definitely.
Right. So
definitely, if them two were like to talk at the same time and about an issue, it would be real off-putting probably.
Because one is really articulate, the other one speaks, I think, a kind of a genius pidgin English.
Yeah, really, really like well spoken, but with not a huge vocabulary. Trump, he gets to the point. At least he gets to the point.
Well, he speaks in simple language that, by the way, guys with hard hats and stuff understand.
Exactly. The average American, he relates. That's why he's the populist leader. That's why you see. I mean, you don't see Biden shirts and Biden hats and truck stickers and bumper stickers. You see it for Trump, though. I mean, it's definitely.
So can Biden win without a rigged election?
Professor Dave, I don't know what you're talking about. It was the most secure election of all time. No elections.
Right. Let's say the election were to lose credibility. Can Biden? I mean, put it this: can Biden win in this most secure of elections?
Well, probably, yeah, I think so. And what's scary is if he does win, what happens then? Because of January 6th, any type of protest or organized. Even if there is legitimate fraud, it's going to get, it's scary. I mean, it's Banana Republic.
Team MAGA, MAGA is now pejorative. That's why I like to say I'm MAGA, just to piss people off. I sometimes say I'm QAnon, just to piss people off. I don't even know what QAnon is. So when I say I'm QAnon, I've not a clue. I am aware that there's some who think some Jesus-like savior is coming. I'm not that level.
Trust the plan. Trust the plan.
The plan. Q is coming. Q is coming. I don't know who Q. I think QAnon was probably originally a bunch of former spooks who went rogue.
Well, what Alex Jones says is that he knows who QAnon is, and it was an actual insider that was leaking like real stuff, but then it got hijacked, and that's where the whole you know, they call them the white hats, where like one day these white hats are going to come out of the woodwork and they're the good guys in government that's been laying
But
under
that, for
cover.
all you know, that's CIA shit to hijack it too, right? This is not hijacked by people who are trying to do good with hijacking. So
You
that's
got to
the real
question
problem.
everything. You got
You know,
to,
the Patriot Front, right? What a farce. What a
crazy.
farce. I think, for example, the Patriot Front guys, to the extent they're feds, are treasonous.
Yeah, and it's I think they even said, even with the Proud Boys, that a lot of the people in the leadership of the Proud Boys were feds or something. So it's like, okay, are the feds infiltrating these groups, or the feds these groups, and that people are
That's
just
pretty vague, yeah.
gravitating toward these federal created groups? That's what confuses me.
Well, for example, the group that supposedly planned on kidnapping Gretchen Whitmer was 80% feds and 20% suckers.
And that story just went away. Like nobody went to jail.
Well, no. The guys got tried and they were acquitted, but their lives have been destroyed. You can't go through a trial like that without you being permanently damaged emotionally.
Oh yeah, through the media and just social media,
But also just feeling vulnerable. So to me, Biden's most treasonous thing, the thing I will never forgive him and his comrades in the left, if necessary, is weaponization of the DOJ. Now, so I said I had dinner with a former Supreme Court justice of the state of New York, and I pinned him down on the things like the Colorado Supreme Court decision. He said it was a catastrophe, but they did it. They were willing to throw their credibility completely under the bus for something that wasn't even going to have a lasting effect. It's going to get overturned. And so why would they do that?
To, I guess, just nonstop propaganda, Trump bad.
No. But why is a member of the Supreme Court going to throw the Supreme Court under the bus? That's one of those things where you say, I will not do that because I have basal level belief in our system, and that would just undermine. It's like saying, if someone, would you have sex with a child? You go, no. Period. No. Right? I don't care what you do. No. They should have been there. And they weren't. And the question is why? My pedophile analogy, there's a reason why I brought that up.
Why is that?
They might be compromised.
Oh, yeah. It's again, with the tapes on Epstein Island that we seen the FBI.
Epstein's tip of the iceberg.
Oh, I think you're right. And that's, it's very.
Here's what I'll tell you. It was funny. So when that CIA guy showed up at my talk on pedophile networks, that morning, I'd had an argument with a colleague who was hypercritical of me. And he said, it's irresponsible for you to go here. And I said, so let me ask you this. It is estimated between 1 and 10 million kids a year disappear. Can you name one person who's been convicted of receiving one of these kids? He goes, no. And I said, therefore, where are they going? Why is no one being arrested for this? I can actually name a few, but they usually get pretty mild terms and stuff too. And if you ask someone, if someone got one, it would be Denny Hastert, former Speaker of the House. He got in trouble, which probably means he pissed someone off. But until you can explain where 1 to 10 million kids disappear to, you should shut your mouth about someone else who's trying to figure out where they're going. And you should not be critical of them. And I'll tell you, it is a very deep and dark story. And I still haven't answered the question of where 1 to 10 million kids go to. I have some sense. I don't think there's a consumer base for 1 to 10 million kids in the usual sense.
I hope not.
Well, but they're going away. And by the way,
going.
Most of them are dying very quickly. Very quickly.
We see, the Epstein Island, like you said, that being just the tip of the iceberg. And then, when you really pull back the veil, it's like, okay, well, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Well, I'll tell you why that's the tip of even Epstein's iceberg. Because there's a ton of people Epstein dealt with that said, I'm not going to his island. But at the same time, enjoyed the benefits of his services in, say, for example, his condo in New York.
Exactly. Or did you see Zorro Ranch?
Who?
So Epstein, obviously everybody knows about the island or his townhouse in New York. He had a thing called Zorro Ranch. And did you see that? I mean, it looks like something out of a horror movie, Professor Dave.
Well, the other thing is, I saw the police video of his condo, his townhouse in New York. And when they do in these police videos, they just go and film everything. They just film it. They don't narrate it or anything. They just film everything as evidence. And it was immediately obvious that this was a multi-unit bed and breakfast like operation, right?
Oh, yeah.
There were, every room had a bathroom with stacked towels and toiletries and stuff like that. And every room, and there was just room after room after room. And so the island could be one of these where smart pervs are going, no, don't go to his island. That's toxic, but have a nice day and do whatever you want, but stay away from the island. The island could be a tiny fraction of the problem, of Epstein's problem.
In even the island, just more and more questions, because what it looks like, some kids that went on the island, a lot of the big tower thing, it's like fake. It's like it looks like doors and stuff, but it's all painted on, that big tower thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked in it, just looked like an empty room, I think they said on the video. So what the rumor is there's something underneath.
Well, so when you read about pedophile networks, one of the things you find over and over and over are tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
Tunnels. Everything gets done underground.
Mm-hmm. Where they get the people to dig these tunnels? You're like, what? Crazy.
I'll tell you how. They're rich and powerful.
Mm.
The consumers of these children are not in trailer parks. They're not. They're not impoverished. They're not the guys with on sex registries.
Mm-hmm.
And I've listened to countless victims talk about their experience, and there's this huge overlap in their stories, and they all mention villas, castles. A lot of them that I've come across are European based. Switzerland has a terrible problem. And they're people of great wealth and power.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is, what percentage does this represent of the 1 million to 10 million who are missing?
Yeah, it's, I remember, like, I'd tell people when I'd go to Walmart when I was a kid, I think like in middle school, and they don't think they do it anymore, but in Walmart, like the lobby, they'd put all the missing kids and their ages all over the wall on like a big bulletin board. And it was so many missing kids. I remember just being like, man, what the hell? Like,
so there's one telling video I watched of a European-based trafficker where his voice was muffled and he talked about trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
He was convincing. It might have been fake. That's the problem in this world, is you don't know anything with complete confidence.
Mm-hmm.
But he talked about someone asked him a question about sort of scooping a kid off the streets of, say, New York.
Mm-hmm.
He said, no, that's not worth the trouble. He said the problem is that just triggers all sorts of events that you have to deal with. It's not worth it. We'll just go to some place, godforsaken place. We can get kids by the dozen who no one has the power, the wherewithal to track them down.
Just nobody will care. They just third world. That's why they say they love Haiti so much.
Well, but there's a better place to get kids, higher value kids. So imagine these pervs. Who are they? Ukraine.
Oh, no. Yeah,
Ukraine's a huge
Marina Abramovich, like an ambassador.
That's right. Great. But Ukraine, the reason and I'm just guessing here, but I'm guessing that if you looked at the market value of a kid from Haiti versus a blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid from Ukraine, which do you think would bring a higher price?
I guess the Ukraine kid, but I know, there seems, I don't know. It's scary to even think that this is, going on. Like, it's, and that our government would even be involved in it. It's like it just can't be real. It just feels like.
Well, so that is the problem. So one of the problems is when a victim steps forward, it is invariably a person with a highly fractured personality, a highly damaged person who is accusing a person of tremendous levels of respect within the community. And so it's an impossible hurdle to get over. So oftentimes the kids who come forward, nobody believes. They put them on drugs. They think they're schizophrenic. They think it's just a mental disorder. And they're simply not believed. And that's how the hell you keep. There's now psych articles written. It's called satanic panic, which is a way of saying, these kids are just inventing shit. It's like, well, that's a convenient psych study. And every time someone has to defend themselves in court, they pull out the satanic panic paper and say, see, this is what the kid's doing. And so there's a decriminalization of pedophilia going on around the world. If you look around, you'll see.
Oh, definitely. I've seen that.
Well, whoever's doing that probably should be looked at through a magnifying glass, right?
Professor Dave, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask you one last question before we go. Professor Dave, the American dream, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Do you think that the American dream, that whatever you consider the American dream, do you think it's still obtainable?
Well, it certainly is, because there'll be kids graduating today will end up millionaires in a couple of years, right? So it certainly does, but it's at risk. And so, you know, when I was talking to Taibbi gave a talk, and at the end I said, look, I have found it useful to look at all this craziness, which you just talked about, through the lens of rising authoritarianism. So you read, instead of reading about some Twitter files or something, you read about authoritarianism. You read Matthias Desmet, you read Hannah Arendt, you read Eric Hoffer, you read various people who describe what authoritarianism looks like, and what you find is a recurring theme is that the people who are in a state which has a rising authoritarianism suffer from two fundamental problems. One is demoralization, and the other is confusion. So you don't know what's hitting you. You don't understand what it is. You know, you feel really bad. And by the way, the garishness of the shit they do, you know, saying, oh, we've closed the borders. You go, no, you haven't closed the borders. Why would you? The garishness is what demoralizes you, confuses you. And so they're not even trying to hide it, because that's part of the story, to make it feel like we got them dead to rights. We still can't do anything.
Agreed.
And so if you were in the early phases of Lenin or Stalinist Russia, you knew something bad was happening, but there's nothing you could do. I had someone say to me, well, don't you think their response says they're losing? I go, no, Stalin was killing people. That's when he started winning. He killed 40 million before he was done. And so, no. And so the message is, don't let it happen here. And that requires standing up and be heard. That requires being Riley Gaines and saying, don't let men compete in women's sports. That requires standing up against, you know, the weaponization of the justice system. And so if you're a Democrat, if you think Trump getting knocked off the ballot in Colorado is good, you got your head up your ass. I mean, you got your head, so because at some point we'll be in power and we'll knock your candidate off the ballot, and you see how it works. And someone says, well, I think it's good that, you know, you do the crime, you do the time for January 6th. I go, okay, when you're driving down the road, you're doing 40 and a 30, and they take your license for 10 years. You did the crime, you do the time. How's that going to feel to you? Right? So I'm asking people who are politically on the other side of the shit that's happening to say, I don't support it because I wouldn't want it to happen to me. And it will happen to you, because if it gets really bad, then the other team's going to do it too. And you're going to wish you hadn't supported it. I blame the Republicans for bringing dirty politics into the system with Newt Gingrich. It's just gotten worse. I blame the Republicans for trying to impeach Clinton. It's just gotten worse. But now it's gotten worse because the other team learned quickly.
Yeah, it feels like it's gotten so bad now where like we're moving on from like name calling to like violence is imminent. It really feels like we're on the brink of civil war. And I don't know about you, Professor. I'm not picking a side. I'm opting out. But
well, right now it feels like the left is the bigger problem, but it's not as biased. Ricky Schlatt's book, Lukianoff is a co-author, but I think she did the heavy lifting. Canceling of the American Mind is very good. And she points out places where the right makes the mistakes too. And it's worth that part's important to recognize. And so when I watch the 3 university presidents come under fire in front of Congress, my first response is, you don't fire these guys. This is crazy. You don't fire Claudine Gay because she blew it in Congress. You fire her because she plagiarized everything since middle school, basically, right? That's why you fire her. That's why you take away her PhD. That's why you take away her job, which, by the way, right now she has for $900,000 a year.
Wow.
So Harvard looks like a safety school to me right now.
Yeah.
They have got to get their shit together, or people are going to give up on them, and maybe they won't. Harvard's got so much money. It's like, oh yeah, it's like saying someone's going to give up on the Gambinos, right? They don't. It just doesn't matter. But Harvard should wake the hell up and get her ass off that campus.
Agreed. Professor Dave, thank you again so much for the time, man. It's always refreshing having you on. I always learn something. I'm always laughing, learning something. That's, you know, what I want. So guys, if you like videos like this, like interviews like this. I'm definitely going to have Professor Dave on. Maybe, who knows, maybe after the election. But Professor Dave, where can they find you at?
Well, you can, for now at least, you can find me on Twitter at David B. Collum. My pinned tweet is my annual review that I write, and it's getting harder and harder each year to write it. So I don't know if I have to change strategies, but right now the 2023 one is my pinned tweet. I do a ton of podcasts. If they want to listen to me, we talk about similar subjects. You just go to YouTube and search YouTube, and guys like Marty Bent and Mike Ferris and stuff. I really enjoy their podcasts.
Well, Professor Dave, thank you again for coming on, man. It's always fun. Y'all make sure to give Professor Dave a follow. And y'all, that's all we got for now. We are out. Have a great rest of 2024, y'all. We're out. Peace.